This is Topaz. This is unheated, natural topaz. You can tell it's the natural because it's a light blue. If you see London blue, Swiss blue, all the darker blues, those have been heated or irradiated. But the natural blue is a very light blue. So I'm going to use this stone for my project today. And this is a whopper. This is 330 carats. So I'm going to use this stone to cut our design today. So the first thing I'm going to do is I need to cut a flat spot for my design. And I'm going to cut a flat spot right here on the top. And that's because I believe the cleavage plane is here. And I want to off-center that cleavage plane. So I'll put the top right here and I'll attach the dop. So I'm just going to use my lap to grind a flat spot. If you watched my last video, I used the Gem Cut Studio or GCS software to create a new Whirlpool design from an existing Whirlpool design by Arya Akhavan. It was a lot of fun creating this design, and here's the link to the video in case you want to learn about GCS and see how I created the gem fastening diagram. I called that design the Coriolis Whirlpool as it jokingly takes into account the rotational effects the Earth has on hurricanes in the northern versus the southern hemispheres of Earth. And because this is such a massive gemstone, I'm going to use my third transfer fixture to dop the stone in. Because this is such a large stone, this transfer fixture will open up as wide as I want it. So it's perfect for larger stones. So what I do is I use two-part epoxy or something silly putty, something Play-Doh, whatever, for the bottom part of the stone, which is not flat, and then the top part of the stone is flat, so I push that into the bottom. And I measured the stone and marked an X where the center is with my Sharpie, and then I used a very small dop to center it, and then I swapped out with this dop once I got the stone kind of put in place with this modeling clay. So the modeling clay will kind of hold the stone in place as long as I don't push it very hard. And because it's such a large dop that I'm going to use, I'm not going to use my UV activated super glue on this project. I'm going to use my epoxy, and I'm currently using DevCom 5-minute epoxy. It has a hardener and a resin. You just make 2 puddles, and I use a business card. Put the puddles of hardener on, make 1 puddle, and next to it the puddle of epoxy. Make sure they're about the same size because you want a 50-50 mixture. And then I use just a bamboo skewer that you get from the grocery store, and I mix them together. Once you mix the 2 parts together, you have about 2 minutes to start to get the epoxy in place before it starts hardening. So these are the 2 transfer fixtures that I had from my purchase of my Ultratechs. I got the first one when I bought my V4 Ultratech, which I no longer have, and then the second one when I bought my V5. So if you're putting in, these are 8mm dops, you can only go back that far because the dop then hits the transfer fixture. So on this transfer fixture, this is all the space you would have. This is the largest stone you could put in this transfer fixture. Now this one has a little bit larger opening, so I could put a little larger of a stone in there. But this is a large stone. This is a very large stone that would fit in here. So for today's stone, because I'm cutting such a whopper, I did need my third transfer fixture. But if I didn't have it, I would have been able to get by with dopping the stone to the dop without a transfer fixture. It would have been not as clean, but I could have done it. And then by the time I cut the first half of the stone, there would have been enough material removed from the stone that for the second half of the stone, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to use one of these transfer fixtures. So again, I'm just making 2 big puddles. One for the hardener and one for the resin. I'm just eyeballing it to make them about equal size puddles to give me a 50-50 mixture of the epoxy and hardener. You don't have to be perfect, and if you get bubbles in your epoxy, that's no problem. And then once I get the stone set, I will let it sit overnight. And harden up. So now we mix the 2 parts together. And I'm ready to get the epoxy onto the dop. I'm going to get some underneath my dop. And some all the way around. Then I push the dop onto the stone, and I turn my transfer fixture over to let gravity kind of let the epoxy run a little bit onto the dop and a little bit onto the stone. And it takes a couple minutes. You just have to watch so you don't let the epoxy run too far up the dop or make it a mess on the stone. And after a couple of minutes, the epoxy will start to set. And I'll put this aside overnight, and tomorrow I'll be ready to start cutting our topaz. Okay, so I've got our topaz into the quill of my machine, and now I'll preform it. And to preform it, I'm going to use a 240 grit topper, and topper laps are just that. They're thin laps. You need to put them on another lap, a master lap. And they're kind of disposable. This is 240 grit. This is a Chinese topper. So at the rougher grits, they're fine. But at the finer grits, I would not use a topper. So let me preform our topaz. Okay, I've preformed our topaz with a 240 grit topper. And I just cut the girdle and the first row of facets on the Pavilion. So now I'll cut I'll probably cut the second row with the same topper, and then go to the next finer grit of a topper. Okay, so I've gone over the girdle and the first row, and if you look at it, it looks like it's almost polished, but it's not. That's just 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap. It really did a good job of pre-polishing these facets. So, and I went from 600 grit, a 600 grit topper lap to the 3000 grit. So, didn't have any problem cleaning up the 600 grit, and it's really nice, coming along really nice for a pre-polish. So after I go through these facets with the 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap, I should be able to go straight to polish. Okay, now when I'm doing my pre-polishing, there's a number of ways to clean up your stone to take a look at it. There's as many ways as there are cutters. So I'm on the P4, the fourth tier. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 right here. And you can see this gap right there. I want to bring this facet down to touch here. And so as I'm cutting, I look and make sure that I hit it just right, and when I hit it, I move on to the next facet. So the way I do it, and again, there's as many ways to do it as there are facetors, is I take a roll of paper towel, and I usually tear off about 6 sheets at a time. Then I just fold this mini sheet in thirds, and I tear off, it makes about 8 or 9, depending on how thick I tear them. And then I'll use this to wipe off my stone. And when it gets dirty, I'll grab another one. So I have my denatured alcohol. Sometimes I'll use just the wipe will do it, but sometimes when there's a lot of swarf, I'll use my denatured alcohol to wet my towel. And then I'll show you how I wipe it. So for the P4 angle, the P4 row, that's cut at an angle of 42.53. So when I grind down and my Ultratech shows that I'm at 42.53, I stop and wipe the swarf off, which is, you can see the outline of that facet. So just wipe it off. Then I look with my loupe, make sure I'm touching the past facets, have a meet point, and if we do, then I'm ready to move on to the next facet. If not, I grind a little bit further, because I'm using the 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap, and I'll go to polish after that. And when I polish, this is doing such a nice job of pre-polishing that I won't need to move the facets when I polish them. So I want them just touching all the way around with my pre-polish. So like I said, there's many ways to do this, to clean your facet, to look at it. Everybody has their own way, but that's what I'm currently doing. Okay, I finished polishing the bottom half of our blue topaz, and I used tin lap with aluminum oxide bat stick from Gearloose, and a very slow drip of water, and I ran it very slow on my machine, 300 RPM. So you can see the swirl effect of the Whirlpool design, and so now I'll set up the stone and cut the upper half. Okay, I've got my stone in my transfer fixture, and the stone is very big. This is just about 33 millimeters, so it's a large stone. And so I could use my super glue, my UV activated super glue, which I've been using for most stones, but because this is such a massive stone, I'm going to use two-part epoxy again. And so I'll use my DevCon two-part epoxy. And again, all I do when I'm setting up the epoxy is I use a business card. You can use anything. And I put the resin, make a puddle of that, and an equal sized puddle of the hardener. Just eyeball it. You want about a 50-50 mix, but doesn't have to be perfect. And this is the hardener. So once the two parts are mixed together, then it starts curing and becomes the epoxy. But as long as they aren't touching, you have plenty of time. But once they start touching each other, then you only have a couple of minutes to get started. So this one I'm going to remove a little bit. It's a little bit larger than the other puddle. All right, so just mix the two together. If you get bubbles in it, it's no problem. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal at all. And you do not have to be exact in your measurements. Okay, so epoxy's ready. We're just gonna pour it into that bottom cone. and push the top stone onto the bottom. Tighten it up. Turn the transfer fixture over. And put any remaining epoxy on there. Alright. So all I do now is turn the transfer fixture over as needed. If it begins to drip on too far down the stone or too far down the dot, just turn the stone over and just watch the epoxy, make sure it doesn't go down too far. And in a few minutes it'll harden. And at that point, I leave it overnight. Or if I want, I'm in a hurry, I'll put it in the oven, turn the oven on to 200 degrees. As soon as it hits 200 degrees, turn the oven off. And when it cools down, it's ready to cut the gemstone. But I do have another project to work on, so won't come back to this one until tomorrow. Okay, I finished going over the upper part of our gemstone with 8000 grit diamond on a tin lap. And now I'm ready to polish the upper part of our stone. This is a very large stone. Okay, I pre-polished the upper half of our gemstone with my aluminum oxide on a tin lap, and now I'm going to cut and polish the small table, and then we'll be finished with this gemstone. Okay, I finished polishing the table. And for the table, I used 60,000 grit diamond on a zinc lap and polished it right up. So now I will soak our stone in acetone, and then we'll be able to weigh it and measure it and send it off to BOPIE. This is a very large piece of natural blue topaz. Today I cut a whopper of a gemstone. I've cut larger gemstones before, but only a couple. I had to pull out my third transfer fixture, which has the opening wide enough to accommodate very large gemstones, to make the initial dop for this stone to the dop stick. I was testing out a design that I recently created, which jokingly takes into account the Coriolis effect on hurricanes in both the northern and southern hemisphere. The new design worked great. As expected, because it was based on the design by Arya, who is a true master at creating gem fasting diagrams. The topaz that I cut was a natural blue topaz from Brazil, and almost all blue topaz that you see in jewelry stores is treated to enhance the color, either heated or irradiated. And it's not because the blue doesn't occur naturally. It's because the naturally occurring blue topaz is very light, and that by treating these stones, we're able to get a much darker or richer blue. But in this case, since the stone is so large, I felt that a natural light blue would get the perfect color for this Whirlpool design. I also felt that having too dark of a color would have detracted from the Whirlpool design, so I wanted a natural light blue. No real issues in cutting or polishing the gemstone, other than that there are a lot of facets in this design to cut and polish, 225 facets. And you could easily add an extra row or two, giving you even more facets to cut and polish and a new design. Please let me know in the comments what you think of this design and of the whopper of a topaz that I just cut. And if you do cut this design, please drop me a note on Facebook and let me know how it turns out for you. Photos are always welcome. And as always, happy fasting, everyone.